I'm wearing a Watson jersey. And I understand you got our draft picks for next year because we don't have a first-round draft pick this year. So, and I don't think we have a second round either, if I'm correct. I think we got two third-round draft picks. My question is,
your first and second.
If you were to take a time machine and go back, do you think you talk about missed quarterbacks, and that's why I jumped in here? Do you guys think that you missed on Deshaun Watson? And if you don't believe that's the case, can you tell me why you would feel that way?
Well, I mean, the only reason I would feel that way is because you can't cry over spilled milk. I mean, unfortunately, we have no hot tub time machine here that we can jump into and change things back. But yeah, we fucked up. But that's the history of our organization. But you know, if you're a Houston fan, then your gain, our loss, your gain. Yeah, we screwed up, and Dabo was saying this guy is going to be the next Michael Jordan. Now, he may or may not be coming off of surgery. We're going to find out if he can come back in 100% strength. But yeah, the Browns screwed up on that, and we screwed up on Wentz too. Go ahead.
With Deshaun Watson, would it have been different? Would your 0-6 team would have been different with Wade Jackson coaching, or would it pretty much have been the same, just different results or different scenarios?
It wouldn't be the same as it was with Houston, because we don't have the depth or talent in our roster that Houston has. I mean, first of all, you need a quarterback who has some mobility. All right. But with the mobility, you saw the risk that comes with the mobility. Guys who play in college, and play big time college, for SEC teams, they're scrambling, and there is going to be knee damage when they come in to the professionals. Sometimes that knee damage does not come out in MRIs. It doesn't come out in anything that they did when they were playing for Clemson, or if they were playing for North Dakota State, or wherever they were playing. It comes to roost when a 340-pound guy hits them from the side or whatever. There is attrition in the human body, no matter what, when you're playing the quarterback position, no matter how large and mobile you are. But you need that mobility to escape the first wave of pass rush in the NFL. And that's, I think, in my opinion, the reason why Deshaun Watson did as well as he did. He has that kind of escapability, the kind of size that is requisite of the position. He's got a strong arm, but he also has some receivers who knew what to do once the play was blown up, and there seemed to be a better chemistry and communication in the offensive scheme there than what we have in Cleveland, where for some reason the receivers just head downfield and don't even turn around. Do I think it would have been different? No, I think Deshaun Watson would have been buried in Cleveland. I think any young quarterback will be buried in Cleveland with this roster. You cannot have the offensive tackles that we have playing. They're not to be taken seriously. These guys, it's so bad, I forget their names in the off season. I mean, it's like, who was it who just kept letting people go right by him and crush the quarterback? And you can fill in names from the past 15 years of this. No, I don't think that.
Cam Irving?
Well, Cam Irving is the guy that everybody remembers, another high draft pick. But I mean, Joe Thomas goes down, and look what we replace him with. I mean, it's like Matador football. So, no, I don't think it would have mattered a whole hell of a lot. But go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
Which comes to my next question. I'm a Texas Longhorns fan, and we got 6 guys that are going to the NFL. And 2 were potential first rounds until the injuries plagued them, like Connor Williams. Would you consider drafting Connor Williams on your offensive line? I mean, this guy's got good morale. He's a funny guy. He's got great team morale guy in the locker room. Great at the left tackle. You can switch him to the left guard position. You switch him to the right guard if you wanted to. He can play on both sides of the track. And also, we got a cornerback named Holton Hill. And I know we talk about your defense, and we know you need a lot of secondary, which is kind of the Texans' weakness. I was wondering if you guys would consider drafting some offensive linemen to help Duke Johnson in his run game.
Well, Duke Johnson is going to be more in the pass game. Duke Johnson is not an every down back, and he will get injured if they continue to play him too many downs. And I think the ideal reason that I want a running back high is because we need a big body who's going to be able to take the punishment, and hopefully a guy who gets stronger as the game progresses. The Texas players you're mentioning, I have not researched. I would not want to misstep into something, but I will say this. The notion that an offensive lineman can be swapped from one side of the line to the other is also the history of damnation and failure for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, if you remember what Cam Irving was when they brought him into the league, and and we have this swappability factor that we love to move people around, except they're never good enough to play the primary position. So we end up trying to find a secondary position for them. And what we find out is they're just not good enough to play there. Period. So, no, I wouldn't be offensive linemen. You can get lower. Defensive backs. What we definitely need is to scout people who have man-to-man techniques, who have press coverage techniques, because, there as much zone that gets played in college football and playing center field and all that good stuff, and guys being, the wide receivers are prolific in college for a reason. It's because the defensive backs are slower than they are in the NFL. If you're going to draft anybody high, it has to be somebody with inordinate speed and has press technique. And if they don't, we don't need them. You would know more about the Texas guys than I.
Hey, Mr. Moohead, real quick. I mean, I don't mean to shift gears to a personal level so much, but what part of the Cleveland area are you originally from, and when did you leave? And then in Florida, where are you at? Because, I mean, I'm kind of the same thing. I'm from the east side, and then I lived down in Florida for like 4 or 5 years before I ended up going overseas for a while. So I'm just curious what your background is.
I grew up in Canton, Ohio. Went to grade school and high school in Canton. Spent many a fine day watching Rick Manning patrol center field at Old Muni Stadium. I did radio broadcasts from the time I was 16 in Canton. And actually had media credentials when I was 17 to attend Cleveland sporting events. It was that was the best thing for a kid. You bring a date to the ballpark, eat too many hot dogs, barf, and go home. It was that was kind of the good old days. And went off to school and college. Started out at Miami of Ohio, finished up at the University of Massachusetts, and hence my non-affinity for Boston. I was there. I witnessed the things that I witnessed, and it is
worse than New York fans.
What makes Boston unique is the racism element, and I'm not real, and I joke around about race all the time on the show. It isn't that I'm a politically correct guy, but boy, I'll be honest with you. It was brutal there. It was really brutal. I mean, Fenway's a great place to watch a game. Quincy Market is a great place to hang out. There were lots of good things about Boston, don't get me wrong. But the Irish Catholic white population in Boston has been desecrating African-American athletes since Bill Russell. And when your greatest sports legend, Bill Russell, writes a book saying how horrible it was playing in front of the fans there, it'll tell you something that this.
He was playing way back then when it was still okay, right?
Well, it's still okay. I mean, believe me, Bill Russell played in the late 50s and 60s, and I was there in 1979 and 1980, and it still hadn't changed by the time Mo Vaughn was playing there. I mean, things just don't change there. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. I got involved in management of radio stations and left the Northeast Ohio area in 1985. And
right before we were great, right before the Brownies' heyday.
Yeah, but I watched it all. I saw it all on the television, and went around the country, man. I was the radio caravan for a number of years, and went to, Tennessee, and to Washington State, and to Illinois, and then into ownership opportunities in Michigan and in upstate New York. So Florida, 2000, moved to Florida, and I'm in the West Coast near Sarasota, Florida, which is about an hour south of Tampa.
Yeah, I used to own a place in Fort Myers, so just about an hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go. Where are you at now, Michael?
I'm out in LA right now. I bounced all around. I left Florida at the end of in 2009, went back up to Cleveland for about 10 months while I was getting all my visa stuff ready, and I moved abroad to Korea. So I was in Korea for about 5 years.
What were you doing in Korea?
I was kind of like an early midlife crisis. It was supposed to be just a year, but a year somehow turned into 5. And while I was over there, I wasn't looking for it, but I started, I did a few commercials, and I had a really small part in a big Korean action movie right before I came back. So I was like, I got to get out to LA before I'm too old. So I've been out here for approaching 3 years now, and it's definitely a humbling grind, especially like when you're used to a steady income that's pretty good. And then to now being that starving artist when you're like 40, it's, for these kids that come out here when they're about 20, that know no difference is one thing. But when you're an older guy and it's like, damn, but things are trending in the right direction. But out here in LA, but it's crazy. You know
something, Steven? He's a handsome guy, isn't he?
Oh, come on, man.
no, look, I mean, this guy, he's in an action movie in Korea. And
very small part. I was actually cast as a Russian, even though I don't look Russian.
That's pretty cool. It's like when they got the Britons to play Germans in some of these World War II movies,
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's the piercing eyes. I have no idea why they did.
Larry and Curly played as Germans all the time in a lot of their skits, and I'm a big Three Stooges fan, so.
No, there you go. All right, man. I'm not going to go there. I have the face for radio. So, I took the big leap of faith of becoming a video podcast back when broadband I've been doing this for 14 years. And, it's kind of like, this is the longest running podcast in Northeast Ohio sports program on the internet. There's nobody who comes close to this. Now, there are better ones. I'll be honest with you. There are better podcasts than this. And if I were doing it full time, and if it were putting food on my table, I would probably be more motivated to make it a little bit more spiffy.
Yeah, I give you mad props because I've tried to do it a couple of times with a buddy of mine, and granted, we didn't do as much research as probably we needed to do, but whenever like one of us starts to go in a lull, at least the other person's there to pick it up, man. And you're by yourself and you're able to just fire the stuff out. That's got to be really hard, but you don't put any pressure on yourself, so it's probably.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It really helps, and as I get older, it's a little tougher because the memory. We used to do a thing, and Bronk knows about this. Hi, Bronk. How you doing? Bronk's in England.
God.
And he played a German once too.
Fuck, this is man doing here.
Sorry, I'm in the World War II movies. That's why I had to bring it up about British playing Germans in some of these World War II movies. I just think it's funny.
That's what they do, man.
Used to do a thing on the show where it was through the chat room, and it was pop music, top 40 pop music from calendar year 1974 to 1978. And you name the song, and I would instantaneously name the artist without any delay. You have to cheat it like this, And it's like, I used to have that kind of a mind. Now it's a lot more difficult, especially, when you have to get into, because I really haven't sat down and analyzed all of the players in the draft. Because I was so immersed in the Cavaliers debacle after the Kyrie Irving thing that I really haven't focused. And I really have kind of a hard-on against college sports, which certainly didn't get any better with the new news that's coming out about what's going on at the school level and the coaching levels in collegiate sports. But it helps to have a good memory. It also helps the background of having done broadcast my whole life. So
I don't know how you keep up with it, because like when I was, as a kid or when I was younger in the early 90s, especially when the Tribe started getting really good again, when Jacobs Field opened, like I knew everybody like you and their stats and how well they were playing. But I mean, for everybody, even for the Tribe, the Cavs, Browns. Right now, it's like all I can keep up with are the Browns and MMA. I follow the Cavs a little bit at a very superficial level, but there's so many people on the Indians now that I have no idea who they are.
This is the problem with doing a show like this is that, if I were to say what are my favorite sports, I would say I probably like watching the NBA just because it's fast and it's athletic. Totally. I mean, it's more entertaining. Football has gotten hard for me because of the head trauma and some of the what has become of some of the legacy players who I grew up watching and the decline in their health and their early deaths. Watching guys like Junior Seau off themselves and all that's really hard.
Because he knew his brain was messed up and he wanted it to be. Oh, God. Watching
Duerson kill himself. It's kind of like knowing that Jim McMahon is in dementia. And
what happened?
Oh no, he is. He's suffering from early dementia, and it's hard. I mean, the Super Bowl Shuffle was funny and cute, and now so many of the guys who played on that team are crippled or dead, or Leroy Horde, the former Cleveland running back, had massive emotional problems, suicidal thoughts. It's very difficult to kind of cheer for that. And baseball is a little slow for me, but it's for the real stat freak, I guess. But
the thing I couldn't really get over is the fact that they still don't have a salary cap or revenue.
Exactly.
So, what are the key elements of sport for it to be a level playing field? Is a salary cap. Or for it to be a level playing field, and without a salary cap and no revenue sharing, how can anyone legitimately look at this as a legitimate sport? I mean,
I agree.
That's kind of why I went away from it years ago.
Well, I think a lot of people don't understand. I mean, from a historical perspective, and Bronk certainly understands. He's been watching baseball as long as I have. That this notion of the antitrust law that Judge Landis passed all the way back in the 1920s that exempted Major League Baseball from a lot of fair trade practices really altered the course of baseball. And now what we have, I mean, baseball with Andy Messersmith, wasn't he the first? Or was Kurt Flood? Kurt Flood was the first. But I think Andy Messersmith was the first one that got positive reviews. Kurt Flood was hated because he was the guy who broke through the wall.
There's an answer for that, but we won't get into that.
Andy Messersmith, who was that? But I think that there is free agency in baseball, and that was a huge leap of faith based upon a complete. I mean, to think that Hank Aaron, the greatest home run hitter of all time. Sorry, but I mean the last of the great clean baseball players. I mean, struggled to make six figures. I mean, you made 100,000 in those days. That was the magical number. If that was the ceiling that very few people were ever able to break through. Baseball has a history of doing what it wants to do and not to be concerned with what other people think. But, look, you can say what you want about revenue sharing and you can say what you want about parity. But, I mean, look at how many NBA teams are in this tankathon this year to literally have the worst record in basketball and be proud of it. I mean, they're openly doing it. I mean, if you watch the Grizzlies play, because I had to when the Cavs played them, and it was gut-wrenchingly bad. And then watching the Mavericks keep running Dirk Nowitzki out on the court, you just want to hold your head. And Dirk Nowitzki plays a German really well, by the way. He's very convincing.
The Grizzlies look abominable the other night. Were they even trying? Do you think they were even trying in that?
I don't think any of these teams are trying. I don't think any of them are trying. I think that
is there any way you can stop the tanking in the NBA, or is there no way to prevent it?
Yeah, unless you can actually prove, besides the eye test. I mean, if you can prove it, but I mean, it's almost like they hang in there for a half and then they just they just piss it down the toilet. That's what it looks like to me. But baseball, there's a bunch of teams that are also just playing for nothing year after year after year.
It's Padres.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a whole series of them. What was it? The last time you saw the Pittsburgh Pirates? I mean, Chicken on the Hill, Willie Stargell. I mean, what are we talking about? We are family with the Pirates. I mean, what the hell is that? I mean, that's like that's like the Smithsonian Institute. You see that in a museum. So there are organizations and then the ones that have very brief moments of, coherence and then suddenly drift back, like the Chicago White Sox,
Mr. Moohead, so the Browns have been around, I think this is their 20-year anniversary, right? Return, right?
Is that an anniversary?
Compare
it's
the
actually
Browns
been longer than that.
Well, 2-17. Is it fair to compare the 2 winning seasons and 17 losing seasons to the Pirates' 22 consecutive losing seasons, or is that 2 different scenarios?
No, I'd say that it's pretty much, The
Pirates had bad drafting. They also had some bad contracts, horrible front office.
Did the Pirates actually try to get good? I mean, the only thing that I see in Cleveland is that we're to believe that Mike Holmgren and people who had established credentials actually tried when they were here. And that's the most mind-numbing thing. It's like, wow, how does that happen? How do we get to a point where competent people or formerly competent people are trying their best and consistently delivering less? It's hard to fathom.
More than anybody.
Incompetence is just not strong enough a word. I just have no idea who hires people and how we still have a head coach and a general manager who aren't joined at the hip. I don't get how that's possible.
And Mr. Moohead, I wanted to ask you a question regarding that. Regardless of who you draft at 1 and 4, right? I think it's 1 and 4. First round. Regardless of who you draft, if Wade Jackson's the head coach in the week 1, does it still kind of give you that sort of notion in your mind, like, is this just going a different route, going the same route, hoping to get to a new destination kind of ordeal?
Yeah, to me, all it is, and I honestly believe this, and this whole Flying Pilot J lawsuit is going to be, it's going to be settled. It's going to be, all the parties. Right now, we're at a point where no new parties can jump into this lawsuit. I honestly believe that knowing that Sashi Brown was going to be released from his job and that minorities were involved, the only logical reason that Hui is still with the organization is that they didn't want to give the impression that they were whitening up the team. And the Browns were always solid when it came to diversity. I mean, not competence necessarily, but they did a lot to bring people of color into their office. I wish they had brought people of color who were more competent into these jobs. But Jimmy Haslam has a lot to lose in this lawsuit. And I think that if you provide him with a general manager and better talent and Hui still loses, then you have justification for Hui being fired and separation from the time then that the other guys were dismissed. And I really think that's at the heart of this, because I can't for the life of me figure out I don't know an 0-16 coach who's ever survived.
There's definitely a racial element to it. If it's not that, it's something else, because did you see that meme that came out after Caldwell was fired? You saw his record, his last 5 seasons. I think at least 3 or 4 of them were over 10 wins or over 11 wins, and he gets axed. But he 1-31. It just makes
he made the playoffs 2 out of the final 3 years before he got fired.
Yeah, there are a lot of qualified minority people who should be head coaches in the NFL. Don't get me wrong. We just got a guy who I just can't fathom. I mean, he is, self-important. He's full of himself. He's a liar. I mean, he just changes his story every 10 minutes.
His arrogance, it's just unbelievable.
Insists that he's going to run the football, and he abandons the run. He puts Kaiser in terrible positions, and then he abandons him, and then he comes back to him, and
he made just as many, if not more, game management mistakes that Mike Pettin did. And Mike Pettin was a first-year coach. Obviously he coached only a little bit as a head coach, but Mike didn't really have any experience besides a coordinator, and it's just like I'm watching some of the stuff. I'm like, Pettin didn't even do that. And
Sadzinski and Pettin were just hors d'oeuvres in preparation for the main course of Way.
Unbelievable.
Let me ask you guys a question. If Way Jackson starts this losing again, 0-3, 0-4, and you know where that ship's sailing eventually, does he make it the entire season before that ship sinks?
No, especially
how far does he make it?
4 games. If they're 0-4 after 4 games, and if they bring in more help, I think that Dorsey doesn't want Way in there, and I think the pressure will be brought to bear. And I think if the pressure is off Flying Pilot J, that it will be 4 games. That's my belief.
He's gone in October if they're not like with 3 wins. If they're not middle of October, they don't have 3 wins. He's gone, without a doubt.
But my question is, can he get 1? I really have the question. Hey, guys,
they gotta get 4 wins this year. They can't just come by and get 1 win. They gotta get at least 4 for the team to stay in. You know, for you and all these fuckers to stay on.
Blind Squirrel will get 4 wins. Come on.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to give something away, and this is for my buddy Stephen Rose, who watches these post-game shows, and Michael and all the people who watch the post-game shows. I am going to create an itinerary because it wasn't enough last year. We are going to find new lakes way to jump into. And we have several to choose from in Ohio that are still within a close enough radius of Cleveland that we should, and maybe even some man-made lakes, if they're deep enough.
If Way Jackson fails, do you see this Kaiser being damaged goods, irreparable, or another coach?
I don't think he was reparable to begin with. I don't think that Kaiser was a professional quarterback to begin with. There was nothing on the record at Notre Dame to suggest that.
He has arrogance to him too. He just comes out. He's
struggling in Canada, man. Kaiser isn't even a Canadian quarterback.
There it is. Thank you.
Oh,
thanks for that, Stephen.
It's only a mother can love.
My God, I am afraid of clowns. Now I'm afraid of Stephen. Guys, I got to get running here because it's already 5 after 7, and I do have to do some things around the house too.
One last question, please.
Yes, one last.
The greatest Browns game I ever been to when I was a kid was the double overtime win against the Jets the week before the drive. What is the greatest, either Browns or any Cleveland sports game you have ever witnessed in person? Probably before '85, right? When you left.
Wow.
The in person. You see, that's the thing. I never was a guy who braved the old Muni Stadium. I watched every game on television. Remember, the Browns weren't any good. In the late 70s, I was young, and as a teenager, I wasn't going up to that.
Right when you left.
Yeah, I mean, and then again, we had to wait until I left the area for Kozar to come around. There's so many games that I remember that were really thrilling ends to games, but I guess Nickel Beer Night was about. I mean, that's about as good as it got as far as total destruction of the stadium. I love the fact that they pulled the rubber off the mound. I mean, that's me. Anybody who could go to that trouble. I mean, that's. Those are the types of people who end up in Montana and they end up panning for gold. They have, if you actually can sit there and dig into the dirt and pull a rubber out of a mound, it's just absolutely amazing. But the best moment in Cleveland sports at the championship that the Cavaliers won was, and it was a muted response from me when I was watching it. I mean, it was kind of like, when LeBron made the second free throw and we're up by 4, it's like, okay, Steph could still launch a bomb and something could still happen. And when that ball missed and bounced off, and of all people, Mo Spates to get the rebound, and I just see it forever, him fading on the baseline and LeBron going like this, because at that point, there's no way that even a 3, and it wasn't a 3 that he shot up, could even make a difference. And in that moment, you realize we won a championship. I was more moved by the reaction of LeBron James than the actual – and more moved by the 1.5 million people who showed up the next day to celebrate. It all happened so fast, but there have been some exciting moments. I mean, I would say that, the Jets game, I mean, my God.
I'm not going to lie. It was so cold that day. I was yelling at my mom the whole time. I'm like, let's go. Let's leave. I want to get the fuck out of here. And then that comeback, Kozar led down the line, hitting Langhorn or Slaughter down the line.
Slaughter down the sideline. Slaughter down the sideline, man. It was like, wow.
We had Mark Mosley, the straight-ahead kicker. He missed
kicking sideways. Yeah.
It's like one earlier, but then, I ended up getting it double overtime. What an amazing game for a kid.
You know who sees that game?
Real quick before you leave, it's a short answer. It won't be taking too long. My question is, if LeBron leaves this time,
yep,
what do you think the reaction in Cleveland will be? Will they say Benedict Arnold, or will they have the 666 sort of mimes going around, or traitor, or whatever, or do you think it'll be mixed reaction, or do you think it'll be more of a positive, like, okay, you came back, you brought us the title, okay, we understand?
Nobody will forget that LeBron brought Cleveland the title, and I honestly think that those wounds are healed, and I think that fans will immediately stop going to Quicken Loans Arena. I think that there will be a very sharp fall off from fan enthusiasm perspective, but I don't think anybody will ever have the same resentment like burning his jersey that they did the first time around, because the circumstances are different. And this Kyrie thing has made it almost like a road that has been pre-paved for him to leave. So I don't think that it's going to be nearly the emotional, what's the word? Catharsis. That's it. Thank you. Yeah. I was thinking denouement, but I wasn't going to go.
So if LeBron leaves this time, would it be a marriage between him and Dan Gilbert? Because I know Dan Gilbert's got an ego.
I think that there's a problem between those two men, and there always will be. I think there's a political difference, and I think that there's obviously a difference in philosophy of how to run the business. Nobody can question Gilbert in terms of his financial commitment to the team as far as paying the bill. But obviously, I think LeBron James has differences of opinion in terms of maybe how that money would be spent, or, perhaps the level of scrutiny that employees are under. I think that I know personally that Dan Gilbert's not the best person to work for. He's not an easy individual. And I think that has something to do with it with LeBron, too. I think that loyalty has a lot to do with LeBron. And when you lose that loyalty, you ain't going to get it back from him. He's just not a real trusting soul, LeBron James. You're with him or you're against him. All right. That's it, guys. This has been a good show. I hope we get panels going more often. This beats the death panels that the Clintons were. No.
Don't
I just wanted to call in and say what's up, and wanted to just officially talk to you. So appreciate the time. And
I want you to do me a favor. Do me a favor, Michael. I want you to put a link on mooheadradio.com, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And put a link in the chat room if there is any way to see you in that Korean movie. If you have any access to that, I will die. I will die.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. It was literally only one scene, although it was credited. and I was only.
Did you have
cursing.
the spoken part?
It was just I was cursing in Russian because my hand gets blown off. I'm holding a a glass of whiskey. And the hero of the film comes in, and it's a big shootout scene and kills all us Russian gangsters. But yeah, let me see if I can find it. I know they did have it on Netflix. It was literally just one of the early scenes of the movie. But
I got a question: was Kaz Tadano in it?
Who's that?
Kaz Tadano was a Japanese pitcher for the Cleveland Indians who did male pornography. Look.
I remember that back in the early 2000s.
I apologize. Total askance reference. Thank you for that, Bronk. The thought, I think
he was an extra.
Kaz Tadano had an 86-mile-an-hour fastball. The thing that was so funny is he didn't even have enough arm velocity to fist properly. Oh, for God's sake. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for it.
I'll put it up there, and hopefully chat again sometime soon.
I appreciate it. Good luck to you out in L.A. And Steven, don't be a stranger here, buddy, okay?
All right, fellas, take it easy.
And Bronk, thanks again as always.
Later.
That's it, everybody, and thanks a lot for tuning into this edition of Moohead Radio. We'll be back again end of the week on Friday to talk about the state of affairs with the Cavaliers, the Browns, the Indians, and everything in between. Until then, hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.